Where do I even begin? I guess this all started a little while after our move to Maple Street. My wife and I had finally managed to save enough money for a down payment on a small house in Hampstead, our beloved little hometown. We had lived in our quaint new bungalow for a couple days and were still unpacking our things when we got a knock at the front door. Opening it up, we saw a couple standing there holding a casserole dish. They smiled at us warmly and told us they lived next door, and were welcoming us to the neighborhood on behalf of everyone. "Wow, that's so nice of you," I said to them, taking the dish they offered us. "I'm Jordan, and this is my wife, Christine." They introduced themselves as Sarah and Greg, a married couple from next door. We spoke for a few minutes, but they didn't seem to want to overstay their welcome. Shortly after arriving, they said they would be on their way. "Let us know if you need anything at all," said Greg. "I mean that. If you need to borrow a cup of sugar, whatever, we're happy to help out." "Thanks. That's really generous of you." "Hey, that's what neighbors are for, right?" Not 2 weeks passed before I took them up on their offer. It's not like I was trying to take advantage of them or anything, but I was putting together a new table and couldn't find my tools anywhere. It seemed like they had been lost during the move. I just needed a screwdriver, so I went over to Greg and Sarah's place and knocked on the door. Greg answered and said he would be happy to let me borrow a Phillips head. He invited me into his garage while he went to look for it. He opened the garage door and I went in to join him. Upon entering, I realized that Greg was a compulsive neat freak. He had labeled drawers and cabinets for everything, and I was amazed to see an assortment of hammers, axes, and saws hanging from the wall, sorted by size and type of tool. Everything was clean and looked brand new. His table saw had no hint of sawdust or speck of dirt upon it. The blade gleamed like it had been freshly polished, though I could have sworn I had heard him using it just the day prior. "Wow, you're really organized." "Well, I'm an engineer, and I've been told we're an odd breed. I like to keep everything tidy, and I like to have a place for everything. Sarah thinks I'm a bit OCD. Man, this is really something else. I'll need to buy some new tools now, I guess, unless we manage to find mine when we get everything unpacked." "Well, I'd recommend Ted's hardware store over on Main and 5th. They have a good selection, and their prices are pretty decent. I like to support the local businesses rather than the big chain stores or online places, so I've been shopping there for years." He went over to a tool chest and pulled out a screwdriver. "Here you go. Just bring it back when you get a chance," he said, handing it to me. "Thanks. Much appreciated." After walking away, I realized we still hadn't returned their casserole dish. 3 weeks later, I saw the screwdriver sitting on my workbench. I cringed and realized that we still had their casserole dish as well. At least he didn't seem to be taking it personally. I had seen him just that morning and he had smiled and waved, acting friendly. I decided to go over to his place and bring the items back to him. When I got there, though, nobody was home. I felt awkward just leaving the items on the porch or putting the screwdriver in the mailbox, especially after accidentally keeping it for weeks longer than intended. So instead, I just took them back home and told myself I would bring them back on the weekend. Of course, I forgot to do that once again. We were busy running errands and the screwdriver slipped my mind for a while once again. I didn't realize that Greg was upset at all until I woke up in this dark, narrow wooden box. The same box he'd been in his garage working on for days. He had his garage door open yesterday while sanding it, and I'd asked him about it. It looked like a wooden coffin, except it was smooth and had no gaps in the wood. The thing looked sturdy and the wood was thick and strong. "For a little experiment I'm working on," he told me with a grin. "I'll show you when it's finished." I was trapped inside here when I woke up, feeling claustrophobic immediately in the small enclosed space. I still had my phone, but noticed that all functions on it were disabled, except for a couple of apps like this one. My breath caught like a dry lump in my throat as panic gripped every part of my body. Pure terror like I had never felt before began to consume me. I closed my eyes and opened them again, trying to convince myself I was having a nightmare. I wasn't. I could smell the fresh sawdust of the box I was trapped in, but beneath that was the aroma of wet earth all around me. Alarm bells began to ring in my mind, and I tried to convince myself that it wasn't possible. I didn't want to accept the fact that I had been buried alive. My head was still spinning from whatever drugs I had been unwittingly injected with. My arm ached with a dull soreness as well, as if someone had stuck me with a large needle there. Pounding on the wood above me, I found it to be unyielding and sturdy. There was no hint of weakness across any part of it. Feeling groggy and sick, I turned on the flashlight on my phone to examine the lid of the coffin which I was trapped inside of. Phillips' head screws were sealing it shut from the inside. Hundreds and hundreds of them. They lined the edges, spaced barely a quarter inch apart from each other. They spelled out a message on the inside of the lid as well. I used the flashlight on my phone to read the words left for me on the lid of the wooden coffin I was trapped in. The message from Greg read as follows. Dear Jordan, you should have returned my screwdriver. I didn't care about the casserole dish, but that was my favorite screwdriver. I needed it the other day, and it wasn't where it was supposed to be. Everything needs to be where it is supposed to be. You ruined it. You ruined everything. The voices told me where you are supposed to be. Underground. In the box they said to make for you. Bet you wish you had that Phillips head screwdriver right now, don't ya? Greg. I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. I don't even know where I am or if anyone knows I'm gone. But the air in the sealed wooden coffin won't last forever. I know that much. If you're out there, Greg, I'm sorry. You can have your screwdriver back. Just please let me out of here. I'm begging you. I'll be a better neighbor, I swear. I'll be the best neighbor you've ever had. I won't tell anyone you tried to kill me. Please, please let me out of here. You can borrow my shovel if you need to. Please borrow my shovel.
"911, what is your emergency?"
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir, what is the problem?
We were at a party. A college friends party, and
And? Go on, please. What's wrong?
Justin is dead. And Paul's extremely injured, and I'm hiding in his house.
Okay, whose house is it? Can I have the address?
51 Jefferson Avenue, unit number 201.
Alright, and what is going on? How did your friend die?
Bryce killed him. We were invited to a party at his house, and he killed Justin. He tried to kill Paul too, but I tried to stop him and threw him into the pool. But I could barely manage to escape and save my own life.
Is Bryce armed with any weapons?
No, I don't think so. He just grabbed a lawn chair and hit Justin on the head with it repeatedly until he died.
And what about Paul? How hurt is he?
He got in like 2 hard hits before I stopped him, but Paul was next to unconscious when I left.
Are you hurt?
Not yet, but Bryce is looking for me. He'll get to me shortly. I don't even know this house. I don't know where I'm hiding. It seems like a bedroom. I climbed upstairs to get here.
Alright, stay put. We'll be there shortly.
Yes, please hurry up. I don't think I have much longer.
Just stay calm. It will be alright in no time.
I hear him. He's walking upstairs. He's close. What do I do?
Move to a more obscure location, in a closet or under the bed if possible, but do not make a sound.
All right. I'm under the bed.
Sounds good. Stay there.
Get away from me, you psycho!
Sir, are you alright, sir?
Oh my god. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. What happened?
He came inside. He pulled one of my legs and forced me out from under the bed. He had a knife and tried to cut my throat. I kicked him in the face hard and now I'm running outside.
Okay, get out of there. He might be following you.
I'm outside. Paul is still lying beside the pool. I don't think he's gonna make it. There's too much blood.
Sir, you need to get to safety until we get there.
Oh no. Here he comes. I think he saw me.
Run to safety, quick.
He saw me, and he's coming after me, and he's carrying a baseball bat! How long until you get here?
Almost there.
Help! Help!
19-year-old Bill made a call to 911 on April 22nd, 2020, claiming that one of his college friends was attacking him and his 2 other friends. The call was made from within the house after one of the friends, Justin, had already died, and the other friend, Paul, was brutally injured. Bill said that Bryce attacked Justin with a lawn chair and broke his skull. Bryce could only manage to hit Paul twice, while Bill escaped to make the call. As Bill was on the call and running away from Bryce, who was chasing after him, the dispatcher heard Bill scream, after which all contact from Bill was lost. Fortunately, the police arrived in time and broke Bryce out of his manic state. Bill had received a blow to the head from the baseball bat, but the police officers surrounded Bryce before he could strike Bill for a second time. Paul and Bill were put into ambulances and taken to the hospital. All 3 boys were taken into custody for interrogation purposes after Paul and Bill recovered. It was revealed that Bryce was the least liked friend in the group, and he was constantly bullied at school and made fun of by the other 3 boys. The only reason he was in the friend group in the first place was to be made fun of and emotionally tortured and embarrassed at every step. "I'd had enough," claimed Bryce. While he was being interrogated, he said that he couldn't take any more bullying and humiliation. He said that he had to take matters into his own hands. He said that they had to pay for their actions after the years of torture they had inflicted on him. The other 2 boys' stories were vastly different than Bryce's. They claimed that they had known Bryce for a long time and said that he had extreme anger issues and that he suffered from anxiety and social neglect. They said that sometimes it would seem like Bryce wasn't even a normal, sane person. He would lose all sense of control, even at the slightest inconvenience. Bill and Paul claimed that once they tried to kick him out of the group, and his behavior became extremely strange. He came to their homes and stayed there for a while to talk to their families, and he threatened to harm the boys' families if they tried to kick him out of the group again. And this was the only reason that they decided to let him stay in the group. Psychotherapists were called in, and it was confirmed that Bryce did indeed suffer from extremely uncontrollable anger issues, but in no way should this stop him from being punished for his crimes. He took the life of an innocent person and tried to kill 2 others for which he would suffer the consequences. Despite his pleas and requests, the court ordered Bryce to be imprisoned, after which his friends moved on peacefully without Justin, who was murdered even though he was completely innocent, and whom they missed deeply. All right, so this happened at my parents' house when I was 16 or 17 years old, 25 now, but thinking about it still gives me the goosebumps. It was nearing the end of my summer break, and my parents decided they were going to go on one more fishing trip before the students all get back in school. My mom ran a cafe in front of a high school. They gave me the usual rundown of how to reach them and blah blah blah, and we're on their way. My parents took my dad's Jeep, and my mom's car was in the shop because, well, she's a small Asian woman who refuses to wear glasses. So going out was completely out of the question for me. So I did what any teenage girl would do with a house of empty adults and a fully stocked bar. My dad is quite the drinker. I stayed home all weekend and binge-ate snack foods and watched every Netflix B-horror movie I had rented. Thank you, Dad, for the 3 movies at a time rentals. It was Saturday night, well into the AM, and I was downstairs on my dad's leather recliner. Had a bowl of popcorn, eyes glued to the TV as I watched Ringu. I had all the lights off to really get myself in that horror movie feel when I really had to pee. I didn't want to turn on the lights because I'm lazy, so I walked over to the half bath by the front door and did my business. I didn't bother turning the bathroom light on because, F it, staying lazy. As I sat there, pondering the plot of Ringu, I looked up at the window that faced the front of the yard. It's an oval window, and instead of buying curtains for it, my dad just used some of that frosty privacy film. It basically keeps anyone from looking in, but you can vaguely see things if you look out. Well, as I zoned out, I noticed something quite odd. There's a shape on the window that looks a lot like a person. Now, the reason I say this was odd was because the front porch lights were off. There was a shadow because of the street light in front of our house. As my gears were turning, the shadow moved out of sight. It was at the exact moment I realized that whoever was out there got past the lights without them going off. Like most porch lights, ours were motion sensitive. In actuality, ours were super sensitive. A good-sized leaf could set that sucker off. The only way to not make those lights go off is if you go around the side of the house and crawl over the banister. As I realized this, I also realized that this person was standing in front of the front door. I no longer had to pee. I awkwardly slid off the toilet, pulled my pants up and did a military-style crawl into the living room, and freaked the fuck out. Whoever this individual was had to have practiced not making that light go off. Also, there were no cars in the driveway, so they know no one is home. There's always my dad's Jeep or my mom's car in the driveway. This was the first time there wasn't. I'm lying on the floor, and my ears perk up at the sound of someone pacing the front porch. And now, I'm scared they're actually going to break in and see this small girl all alone in the house. I'm not particularly stupid, so I make my way, crawling, mind you. I'm terrified, so my legs were not cooperating, to the kitchen and grab the telephone. As I grab it, the footsteps stop, as if someone left the porch. I turn to look at the front door and realize the lights haven't turned on. We have those small, useless windows above the door by the ceiling, so that means the person jumped off the side. I look towards the back door, and before my eyes make it, they fall onto a window that has the blinds raised. I don't think I've ever ran so fucking fast before. See, we keep the blinds up by the kitchen table because our 2 cats are little shits and will destroy the blinds if they can't see outside. I ran over to the window and closed the blinds and sat on the floor. I have no idea if the person saw me, but if they knew that much about the porch lights, they know that those blinds are always raised. There was still a glow from the TV, so I didn't see anyone when I ran over, but now I'm twice as horrified. I kind of sat there for a bit, straining to hear any movement outside, but I wasn't hearing them until I heard the porch door get shaken. My dad put a hook on the porch door so that we could let the cats out without them running away. But most of the time, my mom forgets to hook it closed because she's short and way forgetful. The reason I heard the door shake was because my dad must have locked it last time he was out there. Full panic now. 3 things. 1 person knows how to work porch lights. 2, they know about uncovered window that I hopefully covered in time. 3, knew about the porch door being unlocked 99.9% of the time. Now, while I should have called the police at this time like a smart person, I called my dad. As the phone is ringing, I'm making sure the back door is locked, the door to the garage is locked, and the front door is locked. It took a while, but my dad answers the phone half pissed and half worried. I tell him not to freak out, but that I am freaking out. I pretty much tell him what's happening, and he's like, "Call the police, what the fuck?" At this point, I'm in my parents' room and flick on the lights. I tell him I will, but that I wanted to call him, just in case. He said he'd call the neighbors, and for me to call the police. The reason I turned on my parents' bedroom light was to, hopefully, give the image that an adult was present at the home. Before I called the police, I casually turned on every light in the house. By casually, I mean I ran around the house like a madwoman. When the police came, no one was found. In fact, I was so afraid to actually open the door to the cop, I demanded he show me some identification. He showed me his badge and called the police station to confirm his identity. My neighbors let my parents know I was safe and that they didn't find whoever was walking the house. My parents drove home right after the phone call, and my neighbors stayed with me until they actually arrived. For the following week, I was horrified to be home alone. Not to mention, we have woods as our backyard, so I was scared that whatever it was skulking in the woods, waiting. I refused to open the blinds for the cats and to use the downstairs half bath. What's even scarier is on the end of that following week, a woman's house was broken into and she was raped. Her husband had left for a business trip, and the perp broke into the house via the back door. Just knowing that if I was asleep, or if they realized a teenage girl was home, I would have had a completely different experience.
My parents were the most ordinary couple you could ever hope to meet. My mom liked to attend book clubs and often busied herself with her baking. Dad wore a suit to work and had a habit of checking his watch a dozen times throughout breakfast. They weren't at all interested in anything one might consider extraordinary. Humanity could have made contact with an alien civilization, and they wouldn't so much as look up from their coffee mugs. Whenever I needed help with my homework, I could count on my dad's help. If I fell and tore a hole in the knee of my pants, I could count on my mom to sew them right up. When I suspected that a boy lived under the sink, well, I was on my own. The first time his muffled voice chimed up through the pipes, it didn't say much of anything. It was mostly restricted to quiet moans and grunts exacerbated by the acoustics down there. For a time, I roamed the house in an effort to locate the source. It was an adventure for me back then. Nothing frightening, just a mystery that needed solving. My investigation ended in the kitchen. I successfully scaled the looming countertop and pushed aside a set of semi-dry plates for a better view into the plug hole at the center of the sink. It was dark. Too dark. As if a jet black veil covered the entrance that no light could penetrate. Suddenly, the mystery didn't seem all that harmless to me anymore. Just as I turned to hop back down to the floor, I thought I heard the voice calling my name. I paused and cocked my ear. It came once again. Kieran. Nope. I slid to the safety of the cool kitchen tiles and fled the room, screaming about the boy under the sink and outright refusing to go anywhere near it. My reward was a slap on the wrist and a lengthy berating about telling lies. One day soon after, my mom refused to fetch me a cup of juice. I clenched my teeth and held my tongue. If I protested, she'd grow suspicious. They mustn't find out that I still believed there was a boy beneath the sink. Holding my breath, I pushed open the kitchen door and rushed to the refrigerator, bare feet slapping against the checkered floor. Kieran, please help me. I kept my eyes fixed on the task at hand, shakily pouring the orange carton whilst refusing to acknowledge the disembodied voice. It began to sob. Kieran, please. No one else can hear me. I'm going to be stuck down here forever if you don't help. I don't want to die down here. I just want to go home. I maintained the facade, slotted the now considerably lighter carton back into the refrigerator, and turned to carry out my filled cup. You aren't crazy, you know. I paused. There's a reason you're the only one who can hear me. Why? I said, unable to stop myself. Because you're special, like me. What does that mean? Well, like I said, you can hear me. That makes you special. As for me, how many other boys have you met that live under a sink? I giggled despite myself. I would very much like to get out, though. It's scary down here. What's it like? I asked, inching closer. I was tall enough now that I could see into the sink if I stood on my tiptoes. Well, for starters, it's dark. I can't see anything aside from a small circle of white above me. I pondered for a moment, wondering what the circle could be. Can you see this? I held my hand over the plug hole. Yes. Is that what you look like? You look a little strange, if you don't mind me saying. No, silly, I laughed. That's just my hand. Oh, I'm sorry. That's embarrassing. Haven't you ever seen a person before? I asked, withdrawing my hand. I see a woman and a man from time to time. I get covered in water and bits of food whenever they show up. It's thanks to them that I can survive down here, actually. How long have you been stuck in there? The voice took a moment to respond. You know what? I have no idea. Mom called from the living room, demanding to know what was taking so long. I'm sorry, I have to go now. What's your name? I don't have one. My fear of the voice all but evaporated. From that day on, I spent as much time as I could get away with, perched next to the sink, legs dangling against the cupboards. I told the voice all kinds of things. What happened at school each day, people I liked and disliked, the childish dreams I aspired to, anything and everything that came to mind. I knew I could tell the voice in confidence. Eventually, I got sick of referring to the voice as the voice and decided to name him. Crampy, I said, dropping a buttered cracker down the hole. How's that? Sure. What does it mean, though? I shrugged. Well, you're always complaining about how cramped you are, so I thought Crampy sounded good. The voice stayed quiet and I got worried. You don't like it, do you? I'm sorry. I'll try to think of something else. No, Crampy. Okay. My new name is Crampy. Hey, Kieran and Crampy has a good ring to it, don't you think? I smiled and nodded, then realized that Crampy couldn't see me. Yeah, I squeaked. Crampy started asking me for favors not long after that. Because that's what friends do, he'd say if I ever questioned his requests. Sometimes he asked for water. That one was simple enough. I just had to lean over and turn on the tap. Other times he'd want a certain food or drink. Those were a little trickier. I couldn't let Mom and Dad think I was throwing out perfectly good food. One day I was holding my favorite toy out over the plug hole to show Crampy. A small plastic action figure with movable limbs. Can I have that? I clutched it to my chest and pouted. But this is my favorite one. Kieran, we're friends, aren't we? Yes. Friends share. Give me the toy. His voice took on a stern quality I'd only ever heard from grown-ups before. I got the same sense that refusing this request would lead to some kind of consequence, so not wanting to upset Crampy, I held out my cherished figurine and dropped it, before leaving the room whilst fighting back tears. The missing toy didn't go unnoticed. Dad exploded when I confessed to what I'd done after a relentless barrage of questioning, spit flying in all directions as he seethed to my mom about how fucked up I was. Their temporary solution was to ban me from the kitchen, and honestly, I wasn't all that upset about it. I wasn't so sure I wanted to be friends with Crampy anymore. Mom taped a hastily scribbled sign to the kitchen door to serve as a constant reminder that I wasn't to enter. But as days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months, I started feeling lonely again. My parents were poor company at the best of times, and now more than ever, I could really use a friend. I was still sad about losing my toy, but then I reasoned that Crampy had probably never played with one in his whole life. It was mean of me not to share when I had an entire box full of them just sitting in my bedroom. I decided I wanted to apologize and hatched a plan to sneak downstairs once Mom and Dad retired to their room for the night. I winced at every creak of the old staircase and held the kitchen door handle so the latch wouldn't spring back too loudly when it clicked shut. "Crampy, are you awake?"
Where have you been?
He didn't sound happy. "Mom and Dad haven't been letting me in here. I'm sorry for leaving you
All alone.
he finished.
Why did you tell them about the toy? I thought you could keep a secret.
"I can, it's just..."
You're scared of your parents, aren't you, Kieran?
I nodded, forgetting once again that Crampy couldn't see me. To my surprise, he responded.
I thought so. But you know something? I think you need to be more concerned about how I feel. You really upset me, Kieran. We're supposed to be friends and you abandoned me. But there is something you could do to make it up to me.
"What is it? I'll do anything you want. I just want to go back to how things were." There was a shuffle followed by a wet slithering sound. Then, illuminated by the moonlight, filtering in from the window above, a hand appeared. It rose from the plug hole, a dirty, wet, and scrawny little thing, and kept on rising until the rest of the arm was visible.
Help me, Kieran. That's how you can make it up to me. By finally helping me out of here.
I hesitated. The sight of the arm sticking out of the sink unsettled me for reasons I couldn't understand back then. Perhaps it was the impossible nature of what I was seeing and my partway developed brain failing to make sense of it. Either way, I couldn't refuse. "Okay," I said, mostly to myself. I clambered up onto the marble countertop before looking down at the disgusting hand. It was mottled with thick patches of yellow crust and something foul oozed from his cracked skin. I pitied Crampy all the more.
What's taking so long? Grab my hand.
I counted down from 5 and pressed my hand into his with a squelch, squatting into a position I could better lift him from. The logistics didn't make much sense. I couldn't see how a person, no matter how frail, could possibly squeeze through the comparatively tiny hole. Regardless, I gripped my teeth and pulled with all my might, feet slipping in the wet basin. It was then Crampy laughed, not a joyful laugh, but a nasty, mocking one instead.
You know what? I just had an even better idea. Since it seems I can't get out, you should join me down here instead.
I protested and tried to yank my hand free from Crampy's grip, but he was far too strong.
Come on,
he said, arm retracting slowly into the sink.
You'll get to play with your favorite toy again. We can even play with it together. Every day will be so much fun, and you'll never have to deal with those miserable parents of yours ever again.
"Please," I pleaded as my hand inched closer to the plug hole. "I won't fit! I won't fit!"
Oh, that's what you're worried about? Don't worry, I'll make sure you do.
There was a sound like a switch being flicked, followed by a loud whirring from inside the sink. I begged and yelled and screamed for Crampy to let me go, but it was no use. My fingers hit something sharp and hard, and then I couldn't feel them anymore. Crampy was saying something, but I couldn't hear him over the storm of bone and flesh rending beneath me. When there was nothing left for Crampy to hold on to, I was able to slide what remained of my arm free. In a daze, I fell back and cradled the mangled, bloody stump against my body. Dad was the first to burst into the room, screaming for my mom to call an ambulance as he wrapped a towel around the mess of gore. He was a scary man when he got mad, but the panicked face he wore now was somehow much scarier. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away from me was a fiery red eye staring up at me from the sink, crinkled in an angry expression. A bony finger poked up through the hole and beckoned me to come back before the world turned black. I'm 17 years old now. I spend most days working to earn a little extra cash. The original goal was to scrape up enough money to escape this nightmare from Crampy. Of course, that's easier said than done. There aren't too many places that choose to hire a kid with one arm over someone still in possession of all their limbs. A few years back, my mom gave birth to a baby girl. I didn't care much for Charlotte at first. It felt as though an invisible barrier separated me from the rest of the family after everything that happened. So I didn't bond with her like I probably should have, but now, for her sake, I'm thinking I should stay put. She started talking about the voice coming from under the sink. My grandma and I were always pretty close. When I was a young child, she taught me how to play the piano. We spent many nights playing all sorts of fun board games. She had a kind, loving heart, but she was stubborn to the core. She was stronger than anyone. However, I had lost contact with her after I left for college a few states away. She called a few times and we chatted the day away. I was shocked to hear only a few months later that she had become very sick. Her calls when she was sick had taken a strange turn. She was frantic and breathing heavily. She started saying things were following her and she was frightened. I tried to calm her down, but eventually my mom got concerned and went to go live with her. The calls stopped after that. Exactly a week ago, my mother texted me asking to look after Grandma. She had to go on an urgent business trip and couldn't leave Grandma with a stranger. I obliged and took the bus over. I had a few weeks off anyway, and I did miss the stubborn lady. I arrived at the house on Monday. My mom had left a few hours earlier. When I opened the door with luggage in my hand, I felt an overwhelming sadness. The house I remembered so clearly was just an echo of what it used to be. It was filthy and clearly had not been maintained like it used to. My mother had left a note on the fridge with everything I needed to do. Strangely, there was very little on the list. Besides all the basics like feeding, pills, dressing, bathing, there was one that stood out to me the most. At the bottom, underlined 3 times, stood, "Don't get too close." My first thought was that was some kind of joke, but then again, my mother wasn't the joke type. How was I supposed to do all my tasks without getting too close? It seemed impossible. I pondered to myself, thinking my mother had a strange sense of humor after all. I wrote it off. I wish I hadn't. Seeing her in the flesh was a strange sight. She laid in her armchair all day in front of the TV. Her eyes were almost see-through with glassiness. Her mouth pressed tightly and her breathing was shallow and hoarse. I hated to think it, but it freaked me out. I gave her all her medicine and made sure to turn on the feeding tube exactly when it said to on the note. I was very precise. I got very close when I had to brush her teeth. I think she held her breath when I did it. She must have been nervous. I felt so bad for her. She didn't move or speak or react during these tasks. She just stared blankly at the screen. I had to almost pry her mouth open. On Tuesday, I woke up expecting her to at least have moved around in her sleep, but she was still in the exact same position in the armchair. She could have asked me to move her to her bed. I told her that she was welcome to ask me any time. No response. That afternoon when I went to get her pills in the cupboard, I finally heard her speak. She said only one word. Stay. I turned around instantly, expecting her to look at me with a sorrowful smile, but she was still in the exact same position. I turned back around and said, "I'm always here. You know that. Of course I'll..." She cut me off. Her voice was strangely raspy.
Come closer.
She was still staring at the screen with a blank gaze. Grandma? I tested the waters. Nothing. This was freaking me out. Was I hearing voices? Was she messing with me? Perhaps I needed a break. This was getting to me. I gave her all her medicine while attentively watching her for any movement. And on Wednesday morning, the realization hit me she only spoke when I didn't look at her. But why? Maybe she was ashamed of the state she was in? It was strange, but I went with it as I had not gotten any communication yet. I walked to the living room after a walk outside and turned back around. Grandma? Are you okay? You haven't said much to me since I got here. I'm always here for you.
Closer.
Why did she want me so close? I hesitantly reverse walked to right beside her.
Closer.
That didn't sound like her.
Closer.
In fact, that sounded like someone else. Grandma, I am right here. My voice was shaking. I moved one step closer. My heart was beating faster and faster. I wish I could run away. I felt like she was watching my every movement, waiting for something. And suddenly, she grabbed my hand aggressively. I immediately spun around, but she let go in a split second. There she was, in her chair, exactly the same. I heard breathing with a hoarse, shortened air. I got so scared in that house, I couldn't sleep that night. I felt like I was being watched, and frankly, I was worried for my grandma. She was acting very odd. I shuddered to think of it, but it felt like that hand belonged to someone else. Plus, the house reeked. I was scared rats had died underneath the floorboards where Grandma slept, so I panicked and called my friend, Amy, who was a nurse, to drive over. Amy was very kind to come over in the dead of night. She started talking about how it was normal to be a bit freaked out in this situation, but she stopped dead in her tracks when she walked around my grandma. She inspected her carefully and with worry in her eyes. Well, will she be alright? I think she was a bit confused earlier. Gemma, she said. She has been dead for days now, maybe even a week. I'm so sorry. The shock didn't set in after about a minute when she said it. How was this possible? Christ, how did I not realize this? It broke me. I realized soon after my mom had warned me not to get too close to her. No, not as some horrid joke. She didn't want me to realize the breathing I was hearing was not Grandma's. That leaves me with one question today. Who the hell was I talking to?